I was 25 when the cop tapped on the glass and asked whose car it was. My brother, slumped in the passenger seat, still wearing his graduation cap, breath soaked in whiskey and panic, while I, red-eyed and wrecked, said it was mine, said I was driving, said everything that would keep him clean. He never spoke, and the officer never tested him. My name went on the record, my prints on the file, and the story stayed inside the family like mildew beneath wallpaper. Nate went back to campus in August, and I went into detox. Nobody visited. That was our goodbye. They told me in rehab that silence was complicity, that taking someone else's punishment is its own kind of betrayal, but I didn't believe them. I thought love meant shielding the people who still had futures to lose, even if it meant carving out your own. I told them I was tired. They told me that was honest. I earned my 3-month chip on a Wednesday and came back to a family that treated me like a distant cousin who showed up unannounced. The only thing they ever asked was whether I planned to stay clean this time. I said yes. I worked nights at a diner off Route 9, flipping pancakes and dodging pity, paying for my mistakes twice, once in the courtroom and again in every sideways glance from people who remembered the headlines but never asked what really happened. I didn't drink. I didn't use. I stayed away from birthdays, holidays, and especially weddings because even when I was invited, which was rare, the air always changed when I walked into a room. Like recovery was contagious, like shame could be caught. So I stayed sober and stayed out of the frame. That was the safest place I knew. Then came the wedding, the one that split the rest of the silence. I found out from a coworker scrolling through her phone during the lunch shift, pausing on a photo tagged #WalkerWedding. It was Nate, smiling like he'd never cried in my arms at 3 a.m., wearing a gray suit beside a woman with skin like porcelain and hands that probably never had to beg. I nodded like I already knew. I took the plate of waffles to table 6. Then I stepped outside and stared at the sky, wondering when exactly my name stopped belonging in his story. I called my mother that night, calm, no tremble in my voice. She picked up like she'd been expecting it. "They just want a peaceful day," she said, like I was violence in a dress, like my presence would make the flowers wilt. "Celeste," she said, "you stir things up." I wanted to ask what exactly I stirred. The truth? The part where I went to court for her son? The part where she let me? But I just said okay. I always say okay. It's the word that raised me. The word that buried me. The word that kept me on the outside. That night, I walked home from the diner under a sky full of stars that never looked back. I passed the liquor store on 8th, the one I used to stumble out of with my paycheck in one hand and a promise to do better in the other. I didn't go in. I didn't even pause. I kept walking, straight-backed, phone off, boots loud on the sidewalk like I wanted the night to remember me. I thought about writing him, thought about asking what I did that made me disposable, but I already knew. I stopped being useful. Back home, I took off my apron and opened my journal, the one my sponsor gave me, the one with half-filled pages and coffee stains and grief scribbled between quotes about hope. I wrote, "Found out about the wedding today." Then I crossed it out. Then I wrote it again, slower, because pretending it didn't hurt never worked for me. I could hear my neighbor's TV through the wall, some sitcom with fake laughter, and, for a second, I wished I could laugh that easily too. But grief doesn't do punchlines. It waits in the doorway, wearing a name tag you can't tear off. By midnight, I'd made tea, sat on the fire escape, and watched the city forget I existed. I wasn't angry, just hollow in that way you get when your body knows it won't be picked, won't be dressed up or toasted or thanked. Nate had moved on, and the family had adjusted around my absence like furniture in a room after a fire. It still held shape, just not the same warmth. I didn't cry. I just sat there, counting the lights in other people's windows, wondering if any of them were awake too, wondering who they'd had to become to survive. Nate's fiancée came from the kind of family whose last names opened doors, not knocked on them. Her mother had a wine cellar and a tennis bracelet for every season, and her father didn't just invest in businesses, he bought narratives. A year ago, he funded Nate's second app idea, took 40% of the company before it launched, then shaped it into something marketable. I watched the interview they did for a business podcast. Nate talked about innovation, legacy, leadership. He didn't mention me. He didn't mention the sister who once kept him from getting expelled. That part got edited out. I used to wonder what kind of woman would marry a man like Nate, someone so good at giving people what they wanted that he forgot what he needed. She wasn't cruel. She was composed. A soft-spoken woman who laughed like she'd been taught to do it properly. I watched a video of their engagement party once, balloons and hors d'oeuvres, Nate kissing her hand like he'd rehearsed. Her parents gave a speech about building futures. Mine stood silent in the background, smiling like all of this came without cost. I turned it off when they started talking about legacy. The rehearsal dinner was streamed live. That was her idea. For the family that couldn't fly in. For the image. Nate stood beside her, raising a glass, thanking everyone for their support, talking about new beginnings, love that makes you better, families joining forces. I watched it from the break room at work, sitting on a plastic chair with my legs pulled up, the sound turned low. He didn't mention me. Not once. Not in the thank yous, not in the stories, not even as a footnote. I used to carry him to bed when he couldn't stand. Now I couldn't even get a line. My manager walked in halfway through, saw me watching, didn't say anything. Just refilled the sugar packets and left the door half open. I turned off the video and sat there, letting the silence fill in all the places my name had been erased from. The worst part wasn't the exclusion. It was how easy it had become for them to tell a story that didn't need me. Like I'd never existed. Like I hadn't spent a decade stitching the cracks they pretended weren't there. That night, I swept the floors twice. I needed the dust to prove I still left marks. Sometimes I wondered if they knew how obvious it was, the way my absence hovered in their photos like a smudge they refused to clean. Maybe they thought omission was kindness. Maybe they believed pretending was protection. My mother once told me I had a way of pulling things into the light. She said it like it was an accusation. I learned then that people don't always want healing. Sometimes they just want peace, even if it's built on silence, even if it costs someone else their voice. I learned to keep quiet. I just never learned how to disappear. I imagined the seating chart, my name never printed, my chair never placed. I wondered what they'd say if I showed up anyway. If I wore the dress I'd been saving for something worth celebrating. If I stood at the back of the church like a ghost that refused to stay buried. But I knew how that scene would play. The whispers, the tension, the blame. The bride's family wondering what scandal they'd invited. My mother asking why I couldn't just let things be. And Nate, caught in the middle, still choosing the side that kept him most comfortable. There's a photo from our childhood, me and Nate, both wearing birthday hats, frosting on our cheeks. He's gripping my hand like he needs help holding steady. I kept it taped inside my closet door for years, even when the edges curled and the colors faded. Sometimes I looked at it and wondered if he remembered being that boy, the one who never left my side, the one who used to ask if I'd stay forever. Maybe he did remember, and maybe that's why he never reached out. Maybe knowing I would have come is what made the silence easier. By the end of the night, I deleted the live stream from my phone, tossed my apron in the hamper, and lay awake staring at the ceiling. I tried to imagine what his vows would sound like. I tried not to feel anything. But pain doesn't always need a trigger. Sometimes it lives in the walls, humming like an old refrigerator, always running, always cold. And still, I stayed sober. Still, I showed up for work the next day. Because healing isn't glamorous and forgiveness doesn't need an audience. I was learning to live without applause, without invites, without being chosen. The letter was short, no dramatics, just the truth. I told him I was proud, even if I wasn't welcome, that I hoped he found joy, even if I couldn't watch it happen. I signed it with my full name, the one I used before things got heavy, folded it in thirds, and tucked it in an envelope with no return address. The plan was simple: drive to the hotel, leave it with the concierge, disappear. I just wanted to mark the moment in some small way, wanted to release something that didn't carry shame. I never expected a reply. The hotel parking lot was quiet, lit by warm yellow lamps that made everything look softer than it was. I sat in my car with the engine off, watching the revolving door spin strangers into their next chapter. I didn't know what I was waiting for. Maybe nothing. Maybe one last moment to say goodbye to the version of Nate I used to know. I checked the envelope again, reread the name, and wondered if it even meant anything anymore. Then my phone rang, no contact, just a number I didn't recognize. I stared at it. It kept ringing. I answered on the sixth ring. Celeste? His voice was paper-thin, barely holding together. I didn't speak, just waited. I can't do this, he said, and then nothing. Silence thick as rain. I don't know why I called you. I can't breathe. I looked up through the windshield, at the hotel entrance, the revolving door spinning once, twice. Where are you? I asked, though I already knew. He said my name again, softer this time, and I told him to come outside. A minute later, he was there, opening the passenger door like it was too heavy to lift. He looked smaller than I remembered, like someone had deflated him in the night. His tie was undone, collar wrinkled, eyes puffy like he'd been crying for hours. Hi, he said, like we were bumping into each other at the grocery store, not unraveling years of silence in a parking lot. I didn't say anything. I just reached across and closed the door behind him. We sat like that for a moment, the windows fogging slightly, the radio off. Then he whispered, "Do you hate me?" I turned to look at him. I don't have the energy to hate anyone anymore. He nodded like that was worse than anger. I thought this would feel right, he said. The money, the family, the way they made me look, polished. He laughed once, bitter. But I feel like I'm being bought. I let the words settle between us, didn't rush to respond. You are, I said gently. But only if you sell yourself. He blinked, let that land. I thought marrying her would fix everything, he murmured. The guilt, the business, the expectations. His hands were shaking. But all I feel is wrong. I exhaled, steady, letting the moment stretch into something truer. I left you behind, he said, finally. They said you were better off out of the picture. They said, you stirred things. I let that sting. You didn't leave me, Nate, I said. You just stayed quiet while they erased me. That landed harder. He looked down at his hands, still trembling. I thought you wanted space, he whispered. I thought if I stayed away, I'd be helping. I shook my head, not with anger, just clarity. I wanted dignity, I said. But they wouldn't give it, and you didn't fight for it. That part sat between us like a stone. He leaned back in the seat, stared at the ceiling like it might have the answers. They own a piece of the company, he said, voice flat. The prenup gives them more if we go through with it. If I walk, they'll pull everything. I nodded slowly. So this isn't a wedding, I said. It's a transaction. He didn't argue. She's not a bad person, he said quickly. Just raised for this. I understood. Women raised for image, men raised for silence. And you? I asked. What were you raised for? He looked at me then, finally. Survival, he said. Just like you. We sat like that for a while, no answers, just breath. The engine's still off. The night's still warm. Why did you call me? I asked, though I already knew. Because you're the only one who ever saw me, he said. And I needed to be seen. My hands were still. My chest steady. Then be honest, I said. Not just with me, with yourself. He nodded, slow and deliberate. What now? He asked. I looked at the envelope, still clutched in my hand. You decide who you want to be before you walk down that aisle, I said, and act like it matters. We didn't drive anywhere. We just sat in the car with the engine off, the windows fogging slightly from breath and truth. You know, Nate said after a while, I used to think strength meant going through with things, no matter how they felt. His voice cracked on the last word. But I've never felt more like a fraud. I looked over at him, face half lit by the hotel sign above us, and I could see it, how hollow he'd become. What if I walk away, Celeste? He asked. What if I blow this whole thing up? Then, I said, you'll finally be free. He ran his hands through his hair, rough, tired, spiraling. They didn't just invest in my company, he said. They rewrote it. Rebranded me. Made me look respectable, reliable, like a man worth marrying. He turned toward me, eyes sharp. They said marrying her would legitimize everything. I raised an eyebrow. You mean make you look clean? He nodded. And stable. And smart. And he trailed off. Not like the kid who passed out in his sister's car. I didn't flinch. You never had to be perfect, Nate. You just had to be real. He looked down again, ashamed by the distance he helped create. You know they offered Mom a position on one of their boards, he said suddenly. Told her she'd be a face for their community uplift programs. I leaned back in my seat. So it wasn't just your silence they bought. It was hers too. He nodded, ashamed. That's why she kept saying this wedding was a good thing. I shook my head slowly. It's a good thing for them. Not for you. He sighed, like someone who'd just realized how long he'd been holding his breath. They called me a risk, I said. Said I was unstable. But I never sold anyone a lie. He closed his eyes. I didn't fight for you, Celeste. I let them erase you because it was easier than standing in the crossfire. That one hurt because it was true. You were scared, I said quietly. And scared people do cowardly things. He looked at me like I'd hit him, but there was no anger in his face. Just recognition. I thought if I stayed silent long enough, things would reset, he said. I thought time could clean up what I didn't want to face. I stared out the windshield. Time doesn't clean, I said. It just buries. Truth's the only thing that breathes. He touched the dashboard like it might steady him. If I walk away, I lose everything, he said. The money, the company, the image. I shrugged. Maybe, but you might get yourself back. He blinked. And if I stay? I turned toward him, calm. Then you become a man who lives by omission. You marry a woman who sees your profile, not your person. You give children your name, but none of your soul. You call that success. He didn't answer. Just stared at his hands again. Do I even know who I am without them? He asked. That, I said, is the point. He nodded, slow, and silence took the space again. You deserved better, he said. From all of us. My throat tightened. I stopped needing their apologies, I said. I just wanted my story to stop being someone else's stain. He let that settle. I used to think you were angry, he said. But I think you were just tired. I gave a quiet laugh. Rage gets headlines. Exhaustion gets erased. He looked over. You've changed. I shook my head. I just stopped editing myself for people who wouldn't read past the title. That made him smile, barely. I think I'm ready to stop performing. We sat there, two former children wrapped in adult consequences. The sky was starting to shift from midnight to early gray, that pre-dawn hush where everything feels suspended. So what now? He asked again. This time, he wasn't asking for permission. I handed him the letter I wrote, the one I meant to leave without a word. Read this when I'm not around, I said. Not because it'll tell you what to do, but because it'll remind you what silence costs. He tucked it into his pocket. Will you come with me? He asked. Where? I said. Back inside, he whispered. I think I need you there. We walked in through the side entrance, the way caterers and late florists sneak through, unnoticed by design. The music had already started, soft strings floating under vaulted ceilings, everything arranged just right for a fairy tale. We didn't speak. He held his breath, I held my ground. When we reached the main doors, Nate paused, touched the wood, then pushed it open like he wasn't sure what would be waiting. Heads turned. The music hiccuped. The bride's eyes widened, not in surprise, but in calculation, like she'd always known something might go wrong, and now she was watching it unravel. She looked beautiful, in the way museum pieces are beautiful, delicate, untouchable, perfected by pressure. She didn't cry. She didn't flinch. She just clenched her jaw and whispered, "Don't you dare do this now," like he owed her performance over truth. Her eyes flicked toward her father in the front row, then back to Nate. No panic, just fury threaded with expectation. She was raised for the stage, trained to hold posture even while sinking. And still, she knew it was over. Not because he was late. Not because he walked in with me. But because for the first time, he looked honest. Nate stepped forward. The hush was absolute. I can't marry you, he said, soft but deliberate. Not because I don't care about you, but because I don't know who I am, and I won't lie to you or to myself. The bride didn't move. She blinked once. Her mother clutched her pearls. Her father said nothing. This isn't love, Nate continued. This is a business deal with lace on top. A ripple passed through the room. Someone coughed. Someone else stood to leave. But most just stared, unsure whether they were watching a tragedy or a miracle unfold before them. He turned to our mother next, who hadn't moved since we entered. Her mouth was a line, her hands locked in her lap. "You told me this was the right path," he said. "You told me to be quiet, to be grateful. You told me to forget." His voice was steady. "But Celeste is the only one who ever told me the truth. She protected me. You punished her for it." For a second, she didn't react. Then she stood, not gracefully, not kindly. Just sudden. "You always had a way of ruining things, Celeste," she hissed. But the room wasn't listening anymore. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Nate had already said what I came to hear. My mother sat back down like she'd miscalculated the script, like the spotlight turned and she wasn't ready. Nate took a deep breath, removed the boutonniere from his lapel, and set it on the altar. "I hope you find someone who wants this life with you," he told his bride, not unkindly. "But I can't live a lie, and I won't raise a family on one either." He stepped down. She didn't chase him. She didn't cry. She just watched him walk away like he owed her everything and gave her nothing. We walked out the same way we came in, through the quiet corridors, past stunned caterers and murmuring guests. The sun had climbed over the rooftops by then, casting light on everything that had been hidden for too long. Nate was breathing again, shoulders looser, eyes clear for the first time in years. "You okay?" I asked. He nodded. "Not yet," he said. "But this is the first thing I've done that feels like mine." We didn't speak for a while after that. Just kept walking, past whispers and glances, past a life he'd almost locked himself into for good. Outside, the parking lot was nearly empty, the guests still inside waiting for answers that wouldn't come. I leaned against my car, watched Nate roll up his sleeves and exhale like he was letting go of a decade's worth of weight. "Thank you," he said. "Not for saving me, for letting me do it myself." I nodded. "You did what they never expected. You told the truth." He looked at me, almost like he wanted to apologize again, but didn't. That was enough. We didn't drive away right then. We stood in the morning light, silent and still, not victorious, just free. In the rearview mirror, I saw our mother walk out alone, pearls twisted, face unreadable. She didn't look for us. She just got in her car and drove off, like if she left fast enough, none of it would follow her. I watched until her taillights disappeared. Then I turned to Nate. "You hungry?" I asked. He smiled, tired but certain. "Starving." We didn't need closure. We needed pancakes. We needed air. We needed to be two people with history who decided not to let it be the whole story. So we left. Quietly. Cleanly. And for the first time in years, together. 3 months later, Nate lived in a walk-up over a bakery that opened early and smelled like second chances. He worked for a nonprofit now, not glamorous, not scalable, but honest. He took meetings in cafes, rode a bike with a broken bell, and said good morning to people like it meant something. The company folded quietly after the funding vanished. The bride's family pulled out within days. The headlines said irreconcilable differences, but the truth was buried beneath NDAs and power plays. Nate didn't try to fix it. He let the collapse happen. Some things aren't worth rescuing. We saw each other on Sundays, no schedule, just the ritual of presence. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we sat in silence and watched birds tear bread from sidewalks. He didn't apologize again. I didn't need him to. He showed up. That was more than anyone else had done. Our mother never called. The last thing she said to me still hung in the air, cold and sharp. I didn't hate her. I just stopped waiting for her to change. Grief doesn't always scream. Sometimes it just grows still, makes a home in your bones, waits for you to stop chasing the echo. The bride moved back to Connecticut, slipped into another engagement 6 months later, a hedge funder, this time. Her parents tried to sue Nate for breach of contract, called it strategic sabotage in their filings. But once the text came out, her father threatening to pull equity if Nate backed out, their leverage dissolved. Emotional coercion, financial duress, and a paper trail. The court didn't just dismiss the case. It warned them. Nate didn't smile when he told me. Just said, "Turns out truth leaves receipts." I nodded. We both knew it wasn't vindication. It was survival. That was enough. People like to ask if I'm proud of him, as if one right choice fixes the ones before. I don't offer easy answers. He's still learning how to tell the truth without shaking. I'm still learning how to trust without bracing for the fall. Some wounds don't close. They harden, scar over, become part of the map. But I will say this, he stopped pretending. He stopped building a life on erasure. That takes courage most people will never understand. And he didn't do it for applause. He did it because silence was costing too much. Because finally, he believed he deserved more. Recovery taught me how to sit with myself without running, how to be whole without needing to be perfect. I used to think healing meant returning to who I was before the damage, but that girl is gone. I buried her with the apology letters I never sent, with the shame that didn't belong to me. Now, I wake up and make tea without waiting for the ache. Some days, it still comes. But I don't let it take the whole morning. I name it, nod to it, and keep moving. Because that's what recovery is, not erasing pain, but outlasting it. Sometimes, late at night, I reread the letter I never gave him, the one I'd written to say goodbye. It doesn't hurt anymore. It just feels like a message from someone who needed to be seen. And I did see her even when no one else would. That's what saved me. Not being invited back, not being forgiven, but remembering I was never the problem. They erased me because I made the lie harder to maintain. They called it peace, but what they meant was silence. And I don't owe anyone my quiet anymore. I didn't crash the wedding. I walked into a room that forgot me and told the truth out loud. I didn't beg to be loved. I didn't ask to be believed. I showed up whole. That's more disruptive than any revenge fantasy could ever be. Because when you stop needing to be chosen, you become something else entirely. Not bitter. Not broken. Just undeniable. And they'll feel that, even if they never say it. Even if they never look back. Some ghosts don't haunt. They walk beside you until you remember how to carry your own name without apology. Nate once asked me what forgiveness feels like. I told him I wasn't sure yet, but I knew it didn't look like forgetting. It looked like standing in your own life without flinching. Like holding eye contact with someone who let you drown, and choosing not to pull them under too. It looked like pancakes on Sundays, laughter that doesn't sound rehearsed, and silence that no longer stings. It looked like freedom, not the kind that needs celebration, but the kind that lets you sleep at night. And for the first time in years, I sleep deeply. I sleep without permission.